Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I rise today to speak in support of H.R. 3547, a bill to the application of certain space launch liability provisions through 2014. First established by Congress as part of the Commercial Space Launch Act amendments of 1988, the Commercial Space Transportation Risk-Sharing Liability and Insurance regime has been extended 7 times since its original enactment. The current extension expires on December 31st of this year, so it's important for Congress to act now so that there is sufficient time for this legislation to make its way to the President's desk before the current authority expires. The liability and insurance regime that would be extended by this legislation is 3-tiered. In the first tier, licensed commercial launch providers are required to purchase third-party liability insurance to compensate for possible losses from the third-party claims by an uninvolved public, up to the maximum probable loss level determined by the Federal Aviation Agency Administration. As part of this licensing process, or a maximum level of $500 million. In the second tier, the claims above those maximum probable losses, and the U.S. government may pay successful liability claims up to $1.5 billion in 1989 dollars, or about $2.8 billion in today's dollars, subject to the funds being appropriated by Congress for that purpose. In the third tier, for successful claims above the aforementioned $2.8 billion, the licensee assumes responsibility for payment. It should be noted that the U.S. government has not appropriated a single dollar to pay for third-party claims in the 2-decade history of this program. The existence of this liability risk-sharing regime has helped enable the development and sustainment of a commercial space launch industry in the United States, including the emergence of several new companies in recent years. In addition, the regime has allowed U.S. companies to remain competitive with their international counterparts. Almost all of those governments provide similar or more generous risk-sharing liability to regimes to that of the U.S. The Commercial Space Transportation Liability and Insurance regime has worked, has not cost the American taxpayer a single dollar in claims, and has strengthened U.S. competitiveness in commercial space launch. And this is not a blank check, since any potential payment for claims would be subject to prior congressional appropriation. The bill before us today extends the liability risk-sharing regime for a period of 1 year. While that is less than some in the industry would like, I believe it is an appropriate length. That is because much has changed since the risk-sharing liability and indemnification regime was established in 1988, and the commercial space launch industry continues to evolve over time. Commercial providers are delivering spacecraft to orbit and commercial resupply services to the International Space Station, and companies are working hard toward providing commercial human space flight. I'm excited about the entrepreneurial spirit many of these new companies exhibit, and I want them to succeed. But I also want to ensure that the nation's commercial space transportation legislation reflects the change in industry and protects the American public. The commercial space industry has been evolving in ways that were not envisioned when the risk regime was first established, and we need to reevaluate if changes are needed to this decades-old law. The 1-year extension provides the Congress with the time to conduct necessary hearings, perform our due diligence, and enable the enactment of comprehensive update to existing commercial space legislation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'd like to thank the Chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Ms. Lamar Smith, Chairman of the Space Subcommittee, Steve Palazzo, and the subcommittee's ranking member, Donna Edwards, for co-sponsoring this bill with me. This is a good bipartisan bill, and I urge members to support it. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.